So once again, thank you everyone for joining our webinar today. So today we'll be looking at business transformation, so changing the business models. So this is the second of four now that we're sort of walking through our customers and helping our customers to really understand how the business models change, and as you begin to transform your business, what are those things you have to begin to look out for, as well as to go ahead and to do to find those things that are successful. So, and today we'll be looking at really all the aspects of around changing the business model, what that takes, etc. So again, I'm Dale Hopkinson. So as we've done before, any questions you have, you can certainly type those questions in. We'll get a chance to look at those questions throughout the presentation. If there's a relevant question that's in time with the content, I will answer that, or we can just hold the Q&A till the end. And of course, if you have any questions where you're looking at more in-depth information about your scenario, we can certainly touch upon that. We can contact you after, and we can certainly get in contact with that. So thank you again, everyone, for joining. Let's go ahead and let's get started. So today, here's our agenda for today. We'll be looking at the industry trends, sort of, what is in line with the market, how are things shifting, what are the common changes people typically do around the business models, as well as the core business models that we tend to see. We'll give you some recommendations based off of what we see and how we help our customers. Then I actually want to walk through some live customer examples, so we'll take about 3 customers. We'll look at, what their original state was, what they wanted to do, how we help them, and of course we'll wrap up with some key takeaways. And again, you can feel free to write your questions down into the question side. We'll certainly get a chance to look at that and to answer that as we move forward. So here's a pretty common quote. So Peter Drucker, of course, many people know me as one of the founding fathers of marketing and business managers. So I want to really start with this quote, because this really resonated with me as well as a lot of our customers. Peter Drucker mentions, what a customer buys and considers value is never a product, or never the product, right? So it's really, especially these days, right? You can think about, you have a lot of the services, Uber, for example. No one pays any longer to just sit in a taxi. You're paying to get to your destination, right? So it's really what the product or service does for the customer is what the customer really identifies as paying for, right? So when you begin to monetize and shift the value proposition, it's all around what you're doing for the customer, or what you're helping the customer do more efficiently. So it's really around that we see a lot of customers looking to create that recurring value. And of course, in creating that recurring value, that gives you now the opportunity to think of new and creative ways that you capture the value, right, off of that particular change. So when we look at what the analysts see, and this is a report that IDC have done called Emerging Software Business in what they call the third platform environments, and this was actually done in 2015. Right, so they looked at the top 100 software companies, and out of the top 100 software companies, 81% of those had some level of subscription revenue, right? Whether that was high or lower, that's not the point here, but all of those companies, 81% of them had some level of subscription revenue. And when we looked at all enterprises, right, who consume or they buy software, 63% of those said the way they plan to purchase software and consume software, they want to do so based on some time. And now further get through really what those models look like when we look at those 4 core business models. And then on average, the top 200 software companies, over the next 5-year growth rate, they expect to grow their subscription revenue by 16%. Right. So the point here is really, subscription and these consumption models. This is where the growth in sort of the pricing is no longer just a perpetual sort of model. Right. So of course we know the perpetual model is the one-time sale, the conventional model dominated the market, right? it's not as effective any longer. Now, I want to be clear, it's not necessarily going all away, right? I mean, we work with some companies where it's just they're unable to have an offering that's perpetual, but they, of course, they look to augment that offering with services that they can add subscriptions around. So while it's perpetual is not fully going to go away, again, it's just not a room that you grow, and it's just not as effective as it were. Really occurring is around what we call of course, subscription licensing. Most are aware of that, where you lock into some kind of contractual period. It can be per month, per year, per quarter, 3 years, etc. The greater ability is around the usage base. So this really allows your customer, if you think of, the metering, your utility bill, right? So being able to find a way to um, bill based off of what is used, and of course you can do things like prepaid or postpaid, and we'll sort of get into those core models there as we go on. So as far as the market drivers, here are the top things we see why sort of the pricing is evolving the way it is. One of the things is packaging, but giving them access to a certain level of the software and service, and finding a way to build them based on what they use. We see this is also competitive pricing, right? So this enables you, if you want to go into new markets or low-cost markets, you're able to offer maybe lower-end version, right? You can change the packaging. You don't give all of the functionality, but you have a lower cost, right? So student version, for example, or university version is one of those big things there, as well as a competitive advantage. Recently looking at Bloomberg TV, and the CEO of Tableau Software came on, and they're really doing well in their subscription revenue right now. And he mentioned, as he took office as the new CEO, one of the first thing he did was he visited about, their top 20 or 50 customers, and the thing that they heard was, they love this software, they're great software, but their pricing wasn't as competitive. They had some entrance in that field already, that description or different tier price and different packaging. So that was the thing that he focused to solve, to be a bit more competitive based off how he packaged and priced their solution. And ultimately, this allows you to change the value prop, right? So by changing the packaging and the value proposition, this enables you to be a bit more nimble, especially around the PM and the engineering resources. You may uncover feature sets or functionality in the software that's just not that important, and others that are important, right? So you begin to invest, appropriately there. So when we look at companies that we've helped, right, and we just look at what they decide to do on the software monetization strategy, there are three core things, that anyone who changed their business model to the subscription or consumption-based license model, three core things they need. They need some level of enforcement, right? So this is the product, what happens in the product itself, right? Something that turns up the feature or the product on or off. Once that subscription term or the consumption term has met some limit, right? Then there's needed, really the core around it is really needed some sort of entitlement system. Beyond the licensing, of course, generating who's eligible for updates, and how you get renewals out to customers, etc. So this really becomes key. We work with a lot of customers who have the legacy, and in that legacy model, but in this, who has what, who's using what, and if you're shifting more to a consumption or usage-based model, you really have to understand, what are they using, how many are they using. You have to be able to get that telemetry data. As you begin to scale the back subscription and consumption models, for sure you're going to need some level of back office integration. If it's going to be used on the front end to create an entitlement based off the sales order that came in to automate that process, and or on the back end, and usually the entire type of billing so that where, again, as I just mentioned, where you're getting that telemetry data and you're pushing that to some ERP or billing system to create invoicing, as well as from the CRM side, right? We have done a lot of CRM integration, and we'll talk about more of that in depth in the next webinar, really back office integration. But we've done a lot of CRM integrations where support team, they need to understand if a customer calls in, they need to understand immediately, the status of their subscription or what level of service they have or what product they have, etc. So really, again, as you begin to scale in the new business model for the automation and efficiency, back office integration, these are three key things. Now, again, while there are three key things, not all the time the projects we work are they all integrated at the same time. Usually one and two are together. You'll have some level of, the good, better, best, right? You'll have some level of use cases in number two. And number three is usually a close follower if it's not in the first phase already. And that just really depends on scale. So if you have more questions around, when does it make sense to integrate the back office to automate things, you can feel free to type those questions and or follow up with us a bit later. So I want to give you some recommendations, right? So really to talk about some of the four core business models, right? So if you just bring your attention to the top of this chart here by where the mouse is sort of circling around by the billing contract. So when we work with customers and they want to shift their business model and sort of move away a little bit from the perpetual sort of model, here's usually four core things that that comes up right now. How and when they implement are all different, but these are pretty standard. They'll want to offer some level of evaluation or trial license, right? So so the whole freeware and freemium, that's really going away in lieu of now, in exchange now for an evaluation license, right? So that's usually core. The next thing that usually comes up is prepaid, right? So this is still transactional, but it's prepaid, right? So again, you can think of, if you have the prepaid phone, right? So you prepay for a certain level of capacity. You can use up to that capacity, and then there's some hard stops, right? Then there's a subscription license model. So here's where you get more into those recurring payment, the recurring revenue. You're able now to give customers a level of access. Usually you have different packaging. And then there's postpaid, right? So this is where you get some telemetry data. You essentially open up the system, right? You have maybe less packaging depending on the type of software you have. But then with this model, you're counting what the customer is doing. How many times, how long, even custom metric. We have customers who count things like bandwidth and storage space, right? So depending on what the value you are delivering to the customer, that is the thing you want to monetize. Now, the rest of this information on this slide, these are all the different permutations of things you can have in the license technology itself, right? How do you want the license to work? Do you want to be version-based or not? Do you want it to work in VM, et cetera, et cetera? Right, so this is just to show you how the complexity builds and kind of what we help our customers work through to help them deploy. But again, the main piece today on this slide here is the four business models, right? Evaluation or trial license, prepaid, subscription, and postpaid. So I want to take sort of individually those business models and sort of give you some recommendations around, or valid. So a lot of times we give recommendations. Sometimes we just simply validate the existing thinking. So I want to give some information about the different business models as I just outlined. So in a trial license model, sort of here's very typical kind of use cases or how we drill down with our customers, how we work with our customers to find out what and how they want to solve, and then we eventually help them to do that, right? So the usual business scenario, and again, this is probably the 80%, 80-20 rule here, right? The usual business scenario for evaluation license are you want to make that self-service for the customer, right? They can go to the website, they can download, or you have some URL that you give away at a trade, at a trade show, they can go and download. Then also, customer, your sales rep should be able to initiate or give a trial to a user, as well as the sales rep should be able to extend that particular usage, right, or license. From a customer standpoint, usually we end up doing a lot of talking around this, right? But for sure, there wants to be an automated workflow. You want to make this zero or no touch, right? Because again, you want to make it easy for both the customers who will evaluate the license, as well as the internal staff, right? You want to bypass the ERP sales system for this one, because usually what happens is if you tie your evaluations to your ERP system, of course you have to do a $0 order, and depending on your existing processes, you may have to get someone like customer service team involved or someone to verify that $0 order, right? So there's some internal process which may just delay getting that trial out immediately to the user. So by bypassing the ERP system and tying that into the CRM system, you for sure want to see who has a trial and who started the trial, right? And maybe even get some more granular information depending on your software. How are they using the trial, right? So those are all things we can facilitate. We can talk about that. Then usually the trial experience, usually it starts upon the first use of the software, right? So someone can download the software today, but they don't start the evaluation until November, right? The license is usually good, 30 days or X number of days from first use. We've seen some companies, they also do executions, right? So you can do X number of functionality usage, within a period, or even hourly, right? So you can get as creative as you need to, and also line up with your industry, with your evaluation. But these are, again, when we walk through our customers, usually in every use case, we have some type of business scenario. What you want to make sure it outlines, internally with a business strategy or desired strategy, and also really big, what you want that customer experience to be when they go through to actually obtain that evaluation license. So again, as we go through sort of, what now sort of the pieces and what we recommend to our customers. So these are, 5 core considerations when we look at, helping customers to implement an evaluation license. One, of course, is the delivery. 2 sides to that, right? So from the customer's delivery, how is that delivered? Is it coming out of the ERP? Is it bypassing the ERP? Is the evaluation initiated from the CRM system, or is it some external web portal that has an integration to the CRM system, right? Then eventually how the customer procures that software from the website, or can they procure from the website or just download from the website? The next step around that, of course, is the trial status, as I just mentioned. Is it based on first use? Is it based on download? Some customers do that based on download or based on installer. The standard is usually, again, based on first use. However, you may have different things you want to do in, between your business strategy as well as your industry. Then the big thing is at expiry time, right? So at expiration, what happens? What is the user experience? What does the user see? What do they do, right? What happens? Are they alerted before, the expiry comes? Can they open the app and look somewhere in the software and see, oh, I have 10 out of 30 days left, right? Do you do warnings or prompts, or is that a static line that they can look somewhere in the software to see that status, right? Then of course another key thing is really the extending that. So can the customer extend that in the same way? Do you want to allow them to extend in the same way? Can they extend with an email request, or do they have to call in? Or if they contact their sales rep, can the sales rep initiate that extension? And then from a system approach, how does that actually happen? Does it happen from your internal systems, the CRM system? Can you do that automatically? Can you track that, etc.? So those are all the things that you need to consider, and those things we help walk our customer through. And of course, ultimately, that conversion, right? Conversion. So what is that, again, what does that process look like? How is the new order entered into your ERP system? Does the customer do that? If it's in an ERP, how can the ERP know about that existing customer's evaluation? Does it need to? But then ultimately, what does the customer need to do? Do they need to reinstall some new software, or can they just apply some license to really unlock the existing software? So tons of different permutations, again, and decisions that can be made to align with your strategy. But these are the 5 core considerations as far as what needs to be thought of and have a plan and strategy around when you implement trial license, right? So again, moving on to the other business model, so subscription license. So again, I didn't really break out a business case and customer case. There are usually a few more that we have to spend some more focused time with a customer to really identify their business case and customer use case around subscriptions. Just because subscriptions may expire at different times, they may have different lengths, as well as the whole thing around if they want to have a common sort of end date, around many things that they sold at a different time. So again, but we certainly walk through that process to understand what's the business goal, what are you trying to accomplish, and what that the end user experience is. But in any case, when you do move to subscription models, here's three core considerations that you have to think about, right? Primary is about licensing and packaging. So this really does two things, right? So it enables you to think about how do you strategically package and price your offering, with the mindset of you always want to have something where you have the ability to have sales to upsell, right? So do you want to do a bronze, silver tier, so the good, better, best type of package, right? Do you want to enable customers to be a bit more flexible where they can pick all the features they want? While that's more flexible, that's more difficult to do. But you also have to think about your SKUs, right? How you SKU that internally in the ERP system, right? Or do you allow the sales rep to do that? Right. So number of different thoughts around how you package that software for deployment. Then key to that also is again the customer experience. Now that you're moving to a subscription model, it's less of the transactional, action. So you really have to think about the lifetime value of that customer, which of course the experience becomes very key to that, right? So what is the initial experience like? How is the customer notified of their initial subscription? Again, how does the customer understand the subscription, the current subscription remaining, etc.? Can they track that asset that is subscribed? If the software is on a particular device, can they track that and really identify how long they have, right? The real key thing around this is also renewals, right? So those processes from activation, understanding expiry to renewal, you want to make that as frictionless as possible, right? Because of course, thinking about now moving to this recurring revenue stage, part of the value you add is not just also based on the software, but based on the experience you have while using the software, right? Especially around procuring. So is the renewal automated? Can the user initiate that from the application? Do you want them to? Can they initiate that from a website, or do you have their payment details saved and you do that automatically, right? Or so a lot of things to think about, but for sure, customer experience is key, as well as the back office integration. Again, as you begin to scale subscriptions, the more that you can automate, the more there's going to be in your benefit to allow you again to focus on your core competence, and adding new value, and maintaining existing value from your offerings. Right. So the back office integration again, from the CRM side, allowing your customer support team or technical support team to be able to identify the customer status, or being able to take data for the sales team and running campaigns, customers who are going to expire in X number of days. You can have, if they renew by a certain date, you can do discounts, right? So you can run all of that from your CRM system because you have that level of data of the expiry, right? Again, from the ERP side, creating the initial order and then billing. If you want to run, subscription billing service also. And again, to be clear, we do not, Gemalto, we Sentinel, we don't do any billing, but we of course can integrate to billing to help facilitate all of that seamlessly for you and your users. But taking that information and running that through billing, so you can get not just automatic communication, but automatic service renewals, right? If you of course have the appropriate contracts on top of that to support that, right? So these are the three core things. Now again, I just kind of quickly gave you some insight into the level of thought that has to go through that, but there's much more. But again, those are the three core things, right? Really how we help our customers think and walk through this. And then for the usage models, right? If you're using, and again, by usage model, I mean both the prepaid and the postpaid. Usage model and entitlement system is key, right? A lot of customers, they even still have, Excel, and they run things on some homegrown systems. But for sure, when you move into a usage model, you must have some level of entitlement system, right? Whether you're using third party or you build your own, right? You'll certainly identify what works best for you, and we can even help you identify what works best for you if you need that kind of assistance. But you need some level of entitlement management system, right? Because in a usage-based model, you have to be able to report on who has what, right? What license, what version usually, and what level of support is also associated to their contract, right? And in the postpaid usage, you have to get the data back for billing, right? Because that's the metric now that you're monetizing is, some value you're producing that you can count. You get that data back from the application and you pass to a billing, right? Usually the entitlement system is the first system to get that level of data because it's tied to the software, it's tied to the license. and then it passes it off to a billing system. So again, that entitlement system is key. Another core thing that usually comes up in this usage model is you want to have some type of real-time or near real-time feedback for your users. You want your users to be able to see what they're using and what their limitations are before a bill or before the capacity is up, right? So if you have a prepaid um, license, you want to be able to have the user to check the license status before they try to launch the software and it's no longer working, right? And also the same in the postpaid. You want to allow them to understand what the usage is before they get surprised by a bill, right? And again, how that's done, is it done in the application in an external portal, or do you have a separate management piece that you deploy with your software that they can go and check that management piece, right? So these are just all the different considerations, and you can tell I get really excited about this. I'm in the rooms a lot in these meetings, and these are the things that really helping a customer identify and solve, when you see them get that aha moment, between their different teams, IT and support and marketing and PM, etc. This is the stuff that's really, really exciting to me. So beyond those, the recommendation, right, and those core considerations that you have to think about when you deploy different models, want to kind of walk through a little bit now some examples of that, right? When we've done that exact process that I just kind of briefly walked you through with some customers, over these engagements, and kind of show you a bit of course, we'll talk about the customer profile, but really about what the requirements were, what the solution involved, what the business impact for them was, and seeing what the Sentinel deliverables were. So first, I want to do this. The first company I'm going to go over is Stryker Medical, right? Stryker Corporation. So they're a medical device company in the U.S. No, I didn't look at the presentation list to see who's joined, but we may have some colleagues from Europe also. So this is a company in the U.S. and so they have a lot of medical devices that goes into the operating room, right? So they were an existing customer of ours, like probably many of you on the phone, you use some dongles, and they had the dongles as one of the primary method of licensing. And for them, they had a few problems. One was around just the time to recognize revenue, of course, because they had a process where they would ship a blank dongle, and once a customer received that dongle with their hardware, with their medical device, the physical device, they would have to get on the phone and they would have to go through a process to activate that license, and only then could they recognize revenue, because until you sent what was needed for that dongle, you didn't give everything to access the software, right? Which is also another good point of recurring of when you shift to those subscription models, you'll have to think about how revenue is recognized, and you'll have to look at that also. That may change for you, right? So they had a few requirements. One, their business requirements were they wanted to reduce the cost of enforcement, right? Because of course there's a larger cost with a dongle than there is some type of software license or soft license for the software that you deploy. The key thing is they wanted to minimize the fulfillment time, right? Because again, they had some shipping involved between their medical device and the hardware, and another process to get the dongle activated or registered. They really wanted to allow their customer to do same day activation, right? Because they now move to a process where again they still have a device to ship, but they have different levels of software that they want to be able to turn on immediately and to provision for their users. They also wanted to have a standard for entitlement management and licensing, because again, within Stryker, of course, a large company, they had more than one solution, but they wanted to standardize on some levels, to have a single solution, to have a single process, right, across all products, right? Then they want to have this, on premise. They want to control that within their own environments. So again, sitting with them and really digging deeper and understanding their business goals, as well as their user experience and what they wanted to do. You can see in the left-hand side, some of the Sentinel products that we delivered to them, right? But again, they had a mix of software and services from us, right? There's some of the services to help them to understand, like for example, the licensing workshop is where we come in and we understand again what those business cases are, what the use cases are, what are the technical burdens you have today, what are the desired outcomes, the user experience, and really work through that. And we offer a blueprint based on that, right? Whereas this workable document where you can take to implement a solution. But for them, beyond the implementation, here's sort of the impact that they had, right? They got their streamlined operations, right? They were able to expand their license models to the cloud. They reduced their operation costs by reducing headcount for them, as well as improve customer experience. So for them, they were able to have that experience where customers can activate immediately the license, so no longer waiting for the dongle to be shipped. So the next piece I want to look at is very large telecom company we all know, Ericsson. Excuse me. So Ericsson wanted to go to a usage-based pricing model, right? So before they had a perpetual license, and they essentially charged their customers per node that was spun up, which made high availability very difficult, right? If you want high availability, you have to spin up nodes, and there was a cost to simply spin up those nodes, even though you may not have used them. So in Ericsson's case, they wanted to be able to allow their customers the comfort and the ability to know, okay, they're running in a high available environment, but only charge if those other environments were used, right? So they wanted to go to a pay-per-use model, and of course that required collecting some data to understand when something was in use versus when it was instantiated, right? And this really gave them the ability to have high availability and to offer their customers really, so in their words, ultra high performance, right? So again, you can see again the deliverable is not going to go into every product name, right? But again, we offered some level of software and services to Ericsson, right, to really get to this piece now. And again, their business impact was they met their requirements, and they're able to drive different value and new value now, and get some customers they probably would not have gotten because they had to pay before to instantiate instances. Now, while they can instantiate those high availability instances, and only be charged for them if they actually use them, right? So then the last example I kind of want to give you, it's a bit more on the licensing aspect, but this is core what you have to think about packaging, right? When you want to move to those different models, the recurring revenue model, subscription or postpaid, prepaid, you have to be able to package a little bit differently. So this is just an example again. One company, OpsView or OpsEra, right? So they have monitoring, IT networks monitoring service, right? So their requirement was kind of twofold. I'm only highlighting one aspect of their project. They wanted to also have some back-end automation and allow their end customers to do self-service purchase via the web. But the thing I'll highlight today is they wanted to have a single application where they can have multiple features and package that differently. Before, every package they offered was actually a different EXE, right? So a different installer. So for example, if you were one customer 2, and you wanted data warehouse and clustering, you installed one package, and then you say, oh, I really want to upgrade because I want database server, you'd have to run another installer, right? So they experienced some customer experience that was not ideal for them, and they wanted to change that experience, right? So what they did, again, they utilized enforcement technology to offer a single application, but you can see some of the features in the application, they're turned on and off with licensing. So now from a SKU level, you can package that differently from a SKU level. However, what you deliver to the customer is always one application. And let's say, for example, customer 1 is upsold to be all 3 features here. Then you just simply send to them a new license, and that unlocks the application, right? So packaging. So again, this is key as you begin to change your business models. You have to think about how you package, what you package, right? And this also gives you a chance to really identify even value. Some things you may give for free, and some things you have to think about. All right, where's the shift in value around, and what you want to charge and monetize. So again, let's kind of walk you through a little more of our approach, right? So how we help those customers like Stryker, Ericsson, and OpsView or OpsEra, right? How do we help them? So when we come into an engagement, right, of any size, right, it doesn't matter. This is the same strategy we use all the time. Right, we like to start with, okay, understanding, as I showed on the previous few slides, right, what's the business goal you want to accomplish, right? and really understand a bit more of your existing entitlement and license strategy if you have one or desired, and really sort of getting a feel of your corporate policies with the team, or just from observing the team and learning about the things that's important to you, or even having legal counsel in, right? Not rare where we'll have meetings sometimes where general counsel comes in, because of course they own the EULA, and they have some things they want to share with us to really make sure we understand. Totally fine. But we start on a strategic level, right? And then we understand existing or desired business processes, right? So identifying use cases, identifying core requirements, looking at customer experience and workflow and rollout plan. What does that look like, right? Identifying any changes that you need to document, et cetera, et cetera. And then only then do we add the technology on top of that, right? Because we know that, especially this type of project, entitlement and license management, as well as any other project, they usually have three core things, right? Strategy, process, and technology. A lot of times, companies gravitate toward the technology, and then you find that technology doesn't fit, use cases, right? So we like to start again on this level: strategy, process, and then tie in the technology, right? Sort of our approach that we help you with. So again, when it comes to the technology aspect, here are the core technologies that we'll look at, and pieces of technology, right? That we'll see how it fits and how best it helps you accomplish those goals that you've outlined, right? So on the back office, the entitlement management, right? So key things there, of course, are ERP, CRM integration, the license generation, usage collection, etc. Then on the enforcement, those pieces that goes into your application. So these are the Sentinel products where we have both sides, right? The product that you can do the entitlement management, right? We can even manage license technology that's not our own, helping customers to standardize, and also enforcement technology. So if you're looking for cloud-based licensing, the subscription, the prepaid, postpaid, even perpetual or metering or evaluation, right? All does that. So I want to kind of give you a brief view in the ecosystem of Sentinel, how things fit, right, in the Sentinel system. So of course, in the sense I mentioned, Sentinel, you have as the back office management as well as cloud license service. So this EMS piece, it can be on-premise for you if you want it, or we can offer as a managed service, right? One of the nice things there is on the enforcement technology side, we support any license technology. So if it's a Sentinel license technology or not, that's fine. We've done a number of integration where we've integrated homegrown license technologies, or companies grew with acquisitions and they had another third-party licensing. That's fine, because sometimes to change what happens in the software becomes very difficult, right? Yes, that's unnecessary and unwanted disruption for your users. However, you can have a same internal process for the internal customers, the operations team, regardless of the license technology. You have the same process, right? And again, depending on what level of integration that needs to be done, if it's back office, billing, web portals, etc., again, EMS can be a subsystem to really support those levels of functionality. Now, when it comes for entitlement management for, again, changing business models, okay, some of the key things that you want to make sure that you have in any system. So, of course, Gemalto system supports this. We've come across some customers where, it's best for them to use homegrown, right? But so again, just information on what you want to have as entitlement management systems. The problem with a homegrown piece, so at some point it does scale beyond what can be used, right? So of course, buying third-party software where it's not your core competence is usually the better thing, usually. So you want to make sure the entitlement management solution gives you the ability to package things differently, right? You can support any type of license enforcement technology, whether it's, for example, if you have the Sentinel entitlement management, of course, we can support Sentinel licensing. But if you found you had a homegrown licensing that you just cannot get rid of, you want to make sure you have a single process, right? So of course, again, we can support that. And that's just simply out-of-the-box web services for us, right? Which is one thing I didn't mention. EMS is based off of web services that is public and published, and the integration becomes very seamless, right? We even have connectors to things like Oracle, SAP, Salesforce. We've done integration with NetSuite, even QuickBooks. I was surprised we did a QuickBooks integration, but it was needed for the customer, and web services were available, so we automated that. Depending on how you deliver your software, you want to ensure that the entitlement system it supports ESD, right? So again, being able to have your customers do entitlement-based software delivery. If you want to monetize things like upgrades and updates, if they're beyond the subscription period, maybe they cannot download that new update, or if they're beyond the maintenance period, right, they shouldn't have access to download that. So we can certainly do that, but that's something you want to think about, because again, as you think about moving to recurring models, you'll have to think about, okay, if we do subscription based, what does that mean? Within your subscription period, do you get access to all updates, or only major or minor, right? And the ones they don't get access to, you want to limit that. And it's usually easier to do that on the entitlement aspect. Again, customer self-service. You want to make sure that your entitlement system is web-based, because the entitlement system, it will be the system of records for your entitlement data. And some of that data you may need to share to your customers, right? So you want, or even partners. If you have channel partners and you sell through partners, you may want to expose it with a web interface, a website. Then again, as I mentioned, the back office integration, right? But really the big thing is around the life cycle management, right? Here's probably one of the bigger value points, where entitlement system in new business models gives you great control and flexibility, right? You can do things like create new entitlements, renew or expire or disable, right? And you can do that, but automating those processes, right? You can drive that from ERP, CRM, or billing solutions. For example, if you had an existing software that you can do self-service purchase, and the customer upgraded their plan, right? Okay, few things happens. So there's the billing, the financial piece, right? And then once the financial piece is cleared, then you would need to update that customer software. Now that typically happens in the license, which is tied to the entitlement system. So in a typical workflow, the billing system would communicate to the entitlement system and say, customer Dale has upgraded, this license. So the entitlement, you would update that entitlement to add the new level of service. The entitlement could push out the license to the customer, or you can have the customer grab the new license from a web portal or the application itself, right? So now how that workflow really gets down to your user experience, but the main thing is you can automate that. If you don't automate that, some trigger would be sent internally to your company. Someone would have to go and create the new license and email that to the user. And again, you may or may not have problems with that process, but as you scale that, usually you'll have problem maintaining that manual process. So the more you can make that automated and really manage that life cycle, the easier it will be to have a clean user experience. So on the license technology side, again, we work with a lot of companies. We work with a lot of companies who, as they begin to change their licensing technology model, again, you need to support turning things on, having subscription, time-based, etc. Sometimes it requires changing the license technology to support that business model, and sometimes not. But in ideal cases, here are the core things you want to make sure that your license technology supports, right? Being able to use any kind of method, if it's software, cloud, or hardware. You can change the business model, right? For perpetual, subscription, hard end date, pay-per-use, etc., postpaid. To be able to collect the data, right, for those usage-based consumption models, and ultimately leverage the cloud, right? We see a lot of companies where they may have the subscription services only on the cloud, right? So being able to have that your software talk to some type of management layer where that's a subscription model, but that's on the cloud, but still not conflicting with the on-premise piece, right? So being able to have that, and from doing that from a single solution, that's usually big. Then again, from our approach, again, as I mentioned, we like to start from the strategic aspect, right? Then looking at the business process. From a consulting side, here's really how we help our customers on the consulting side. Again, our consulting services, we're focused on having great projects. We want you to be successful. You can have as little or as much, us do as little or as much heavy lifting as is needed, right? So the discovery and design, you saw some of the output of that when I had that slide with the business use case and the customer experience, right? We can do solution implementation if you need or want us to. We can help you around the delivery, right? What does that look like if we're managing something as a managed service for you? And there's ongoing training and workshops, right, to make sure that you're using the solution to the best of the value that you need to extract from it. All right. So as a close, for those of you who joined the first webinar, I see a few names who I recall. So I showed this slide in the first presentation. I'll probably have it in all the presentations, right? But here's sort of this software monetization evolution, right? So before, how things were sold, right? Typically, we had some device. You were on this level, you sold a device. It was perpetual, one-time transactional. Companies began to look at driving revenue from software, right? So software, if you were software only, or you adopted a approach where software controls the hardware, you had the ability to change your model there. For those who are still in this evolution cycle, the next piece is monetizing services, right? So how do you have services to either convert traditional product or add to the additional product, right? And then we see companies now, of course, monetizing data, as well as looking now to how do they have their software or their hardware play as part of an ecosystem, or have other vendors play on their ecosystem, right? So again, opening up and creating value there. So regardless of where you are in this sort of transition, really enables you to add and change different business models, right? Usually it's a bit difficult if you stay on one level and just change a business model, right? But as you change and as you transform to capture more market share, or just competitive, how you compete in the market that you excuse me, that you're in today, it gives you the ability now to change the business model, right? So then ultimately, sort of three key points, right, as we're going on today. So one, recurring revenue is really key, right? As we see a lot in this environment, a lot of the new entrants, they have these flexible models, or they make it easier to go into new markets, etc. One of the things also I really like about, and I learned, with the recurring revenue, is just around the predictability of it, right? If you're around any sales team, or you have meetings where you involve with sales, forecasting is always a big thing, right? Because even the forecasting goes up to how decisions are made, and even if you're a public company or your investors, right, how you talk to your investors and what you show them for the upcoming quarters, right? So it really provides predictability and also growth. One thing with recurring revenue you'll have to think about, of course, is you want to find that point where you're not just switching from perpetual to recurring, but it's a sort of a transition, right? So how do you onboard your initial subscription if you have not already, and how do you you grow from there, right? Most companies don't look to replace the existing technology with subscription. They look to augment existing technology, and over time, migrate the majority of their offerings to subscription. Again, the second point, user experience is critical. So when you think about now these subscription and recurring business models, you have to think about now that experience the customer goes through, not just from the software side, but how do they purchase? Do they do it self-service? Do they do it on a website? How do they renew that license? Once the license is renewed, how do they get that license? How do they install the license, etc. Right? So that has to be frictionless, because even that the experience can be a competitive advantage, right, or disadvantage, if you're not doing it right. Then ultimately, one of the points which I'll really go into in depth on the next session, and walking through how that's done, and really what's done and what's involved in the IT aspect. But as you begin to scale, you have to automate some level of this process, right? If it's the billing side, the CRM side, right, knowing who has what and when things are going to expire, by integrating CRM is really advantageous, right? You can create quick campaigns in like a Salesforce, right? Grab all customers who are going to expire in the next 30 days, and you create a new promotion. So having that data in a single place, especially the CRM, allows you to be a bit more creative in just how you communicate to your customers, and really understanding what they're using and how they're using. And I'll go through that a bit more in the next webinar session, so look out for an invitation for that, and we'll talk about more on the integration, driving leverage there, automating things, and making things streamlined and efficiency, right? So again, those are the three key points for today. So again, thank you all for joining, and we can look at if we have any questions. So if you have any questions at this time, you can certainly feel free to ask, as I myself look at some of the questions that have been typed. So one of the questions that I see here is someone has asked, so how long does this typically take? And I kind of chuckle, because I usually always get that question, right? So I can't fully answer that question to you. Your specific use case right now, I don't know where you are and what models you're looking at, but I would say customers who typically have perpetual models, and they want to make their first foray into a subscription model. I would say just as a rough answer, anywhere between 1 to 3 quarters usually, right? If you think of that chart when I had, strategy, process, and technology, technology part is the very easiest part, right? It's all around aligning to the strategy, thinking about how you're going to align this to an existing release. When are you going to release this? Is it some pending environment already for customers, right? So you have to be able to understand. Well, we have to understand a bit more information to really give you a better idea on that, but certainly we can support you if you need to. All right, so it looks like some of the other questions are just a bit more specific to use cases that we'll probably reach out to those companies with. So with that, again, just want to thank you for your time today and your attention. Hopefully it was useful. You learned something. Again, if you think you'd like to see something, again, please feel free to email us and contact your sales rep and let them know. We're certainly flexible as we create the remaining two. But again, the next session will be on automating the process. So taking a deeper look into how we can help you automate that process to drive efficiencies and sort of operationalize, what you do around the entitlement side. All right, so thank you again for joining, and we'll speak to you soon. Have a great rest of the day and a wonderful week, everyone. Bye.